My husband Derek and I have been married for 3 years, together for 7 total. Several years ago, about 6 now, I guess, I worked closely with a male coworker, Paul, that Derek was never fond of. Paul and I never had an inappropriate relationship. Derek's jealousy wasn't completely out of nowhere. I get why he felt that way. Those couple years were a perfect storm of relationship stress. I was working long hours. We were living apart after trying and failing to move in together. Our relationship was still fairly new. And then you add in a handsome coworker I had to spend long hours with and saw more than my boyfriend at the time. Paul was the source of several fights. Again, we never did anything that wasn't completely kosher. Eventually I told Derek he needed to trust me and get over it, or we were going to have to break up. He said he would stop worrying, and for the most part things were good. When Paul transferred out of state a few months later, things were really good. There were no worries at all, and our relationship has been amazingly strong ever since. This last weekend, my husband went out with a couple friends to some bars and a football game. When he came home, he was pretty wasted. We talked for a bit, and he mentioned how a friend of his had told him that he broke up with his girlfriend because she cheated on him. I commented on how that was a bummer and good for him for finding out before they got too serious. Derek, however, had a different take on it. He said it was a shame because they had seemed like a good couple, and if they really loved each other his friend could move past the cheating. Just like he had with me. At first I thought my husband was admitting to cheating on me, and asked him what he meant. He told me he always knew that Paul and I had slept together at least once all those years ago. But he knew I was the one for him and forgave me. I told Derek that I had never so much as even hugged Paul, except maybe at his going away party, let alone slept with him. Derek sort of just patted me on the arm, said of course, and passed out. The next morning I asked him about the conversation and he said it was okay, he had forgiven me, it wasn't even an issue. I again stressed that I had never cheated on him with anybody and I needed him to believe me. He sort of did the same, of course you didn't, babe wink thing again, and went to work. Every time I've tried to talk to him since, he won't hear me out. I'm this close to losing it with him. I need him to know that I never cheated, and I'm hurt that he thinks I would do something like that. What do I do? Do I just let him have this since it's not really hurting anything, or what? I don't want my own husband to think so little of me that he thinks I would cheat. That's not who I am. I am a 28 years old female was named after a really obscure character from Greek mythology. My preferred nickname is taken from the end of my name. I always introduce myself with I'm my name, but you can call me nickname. None of my co-workers in the small business we work for have ever had a problem with this before, until Megan, the niece of Jeff, one of the 2 owners, was hired. Jeff and Dave co-own the business, but Dave does the actual day-to-day running of the business. I introduced myself and my nickname as usual, but she immediately said that Bessie, not the actual name, would be a better nickname because it comes from the beginning of my name and that she liked it better. I told her I really didn't like that nickname and wouldn't answer to it and asked her to please not call me Bessie, but she insisted that it was so much prettier and that I just needed to get used to it. For the next 2 months she tried to call me Bessie, but I completely ignored her whenever she addressed me that way. Even when I knew she really needed help with something. She would call my desk phone and say, "Hey, Bessie," I would reply, "You have the wrong number, there's no Bessie here," and hang up. She then tried to get some of the employees outside the office to start calling me Bessie, but I quickly shut that down. I usually finish my work early and help them with a lot of tedious little things that aren't part of my job description, and threatened to stop helping them unless they used my preferred nickname. Friday she decided she was going to get me to respond to Bessie no matter what. We have an open office design but are at opposite ends. She started calling out Bessie in a sing-song voiceover and over again to try and annoy me enough to respond. Other coworkers got annoyed, most telling her to stop and one Lisa telling me to just let her call me Bessie already. I refused and she kept calling out Bessie louder and louder, until Dave barged in. He'd been on a conference call with an important client and could hear her yelling from his office down the hall. He told her to be quiet and that if she called me Bessie one more time, he'd write her up and dock her pay. Later, Megan cornered me in the break room, called me in for getting her in trouble and called me Bessie again for good measure just as Dave was walking in to heat up his lunch. He gave her a stern look and said, "I warned you." Then he walked to HR to have her written up. Lisa is saying I'm the for never helping Megan and that, if I had been nicer or hadn't fought her so hard on the nickname, she probably would have given up on it a while ago, but because I made such a big deal out of it, it became a challenge. I recently got married to Matt. Matt has a stepsister, Tiffany. I have met her less than 10 times in the 5 years I dated Matt, as she doesn't live nearby and is not close to my husband. However, she was invited to our wedding. I should mention that Tiffany is very attractive. She is pretty, with a currently fashionable body type. She also dresses well and spends money on her appearance. This is well known, and even though I've only met her a few times, whenever she is brought up by my in-laws, she always mentioned as being very invested in her image. I don't begrudge her this at all. The ceremony went fine, but afterwards, while my in-laws were congratulating me, my father-in-law commented that I looked beautiful, and in the next breath mentioned Tiffany did, too. His wife caught his eye and shook her head, but I ignored it. When Tiffany came over to say congratulations, she looked stunning. Her dress was beautiful and fitted her perfectly, her hair and makeup looked like they'd been done professionally. And she was wearing a pair of obviously designer shoes. Her outfit was totally appropriate for the event. But I was still weirdly upset by how she looked and immediately felt self-conscious next to her. Even Matt told her she looked great, and they rarely talk. For the rest of the night, every single male guest at the wedding asked about Tiffany, who she was, how I know her, if she was single, etc. By the speeches, I was fed up and almost in tears, and even the best man mentioned her in his speech off the cuff. I let it go, went on my honeymoon, and tried to forget the whole thing. We came back about a week ago, and this past weekend had dinner with my in-laws. Tiffany was visiting, and we learned that she had got engaged. She showed us her comically large ring and said she was planning to have the wedding next year and that it would be a black tie event. Before I could stop myself, I jokingly said that I was pretty sure I'd already been to her wedding. I was the one in the white dress. She asked what I meant, and I thought there was no point in lying, so I just admitted I felt she upstaged me at my wedding. She laughed and said, "You can't upstage a bride." I asked if I could wear white to her wedding then, and she shrugged and said, "If you think it'll help." She then apologized if I felt her outfit was inappropriate. My in-laws moved the conversation on, and we went on with dinner. When we got home, my husband blew up on me, saying I embarrassed him by being petty and jealous of Tiffany. He said he doesn't even like her, but even he knows she can't do anything about what she looks like or the clothes she can afford. And I made myself look bitter and childish, and him by association. I admit it wasn't my best moment. But I thought he would at least understand how I felt given that he heard everyone's comments that night. He's demanding I apologize to Tiffany and his parents, but I don't think I said anything that heinous. For the past 5 years, I've volunteered for a mental health hotline. I'm deeply passionate about the hotline's work, and I've devoted huge amounts of time and energy to answering calls, training new volunteers, and fundraising. I've become close friends with many of the people I volunteer with, and I get a lot of joy out of helping people who don't have a lot of other support in their lives. I love this organization. I can't imagine my life without it. Today, the head of the organization sent out an email announcing that they've hired a new volunteer coordinator, the girl who relentlessly bullied me in high school and made my life a living hell. I was completely blindsided. I moved across the continent after graduating from high school, and I have no idea how or when this girl moved to my city. I doubt she applied for this job to deliberately antagonize me, since we've had no contact since graduation and all volunteers are anonymous. So it's just a terrible coincidence. But it still means I'm going to have to be working with a person who was unbelievably cruel to me. I really don't know what to do. Obviously, all of this was a long time ago, and it's possible she's cleaned up her act since high school. But I still hate the idea of even being in the same room as this girl. I've had her blocked on every platform for, wow, over a decade now. It looks like my only options are to A, tough it out and deal with this person coming back into my life, or B, quit the hotline after 5 years of service. I went for my regularly scheduled afternoon shift at the hotline, and the girl just happened to be there for some kind of orientation. I wasn't expecting her to be there, so I initially just kept my head down and ignored her. A little while into the shift, she came over to introduce herself, and genuinely didn't seem to recognize me. I've cut my hair and gotten glasses since high school, so that could have been it. It was a very brief interaction, and I didn't say anything to her in return, just nodded and smiled. After she left, I asked my shift supervisor if I could speak with her privately. I followed some of the advice here, just letting her know that I have a history with this person and I'm not comfortable working with her directly. The shift supervisor was very understanding and said that she could arrange for me to only serve shifts when the girl isn't supervising. She also offered to let me schedule my shifts through her instead of through the girl, which I appreciated. Unfortunately, it seems like there will be an unavoidable level of casual interaction, given that the girl is working in the facility on a full-time, 9-to-5 basis. I think I'll be able to stick it out for now, but we'll see. The shift supervisor did ask me what I wanted to tell the girl. Vis-a-vis an excuse for my not wanting to be on shift with her, but I couldn't think of anything to say. So I left it up to her.